Hello and welcome back to Behind the Headlines, where we're discussing the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the land grab that's going on in the West Bank. Now, Moim, let me bring you in on this topic and give you an opportunity to give your viewpoint on what's been going on there. Now, we're seeing these kind of demolitions has been going on for a long time. This year, it seems to have escalated to quite an alarming point now. I could ask you why you think that is, but I would also like you to perhaps give me your viewpoint on whether or not the two-state solution, which everyone clings on to, this ideal scenario, is even a scenario that's possible anymore. I mean, how much land do the Palestinians actually physically have anymore? Is a two-state solution possible?
Okay, firstly, your first question was the land grab, is that right?
Yes.
Sorry, why is that happening? Yeah. Well, it's quite clear what's going on. And we have to be very self-critical here, yeah? The Palestinians are divided, you know, Hamas, Fatah. The region's in a mess, you know, refugees all over the place, yeah? I mean, that is a reality. Disunity within the Palestinians, within the Arab leadership. It's pathetic. And there's no, you know, denying that. It's okay pointing the finger at the big enemy, yeah? Mm-hmm. But the opposition or the Palestinians and the Arabs are in disarray. Mm-hmm. Disarray. Mm-hmm. We cannot, and it's unacceptable, you know. Now, so that explains that. And with the current disintegration of Syria, historically Palestine, Israel, Jordan, West Bank were part of Sham, Greater Syria, under the Ottoman Empire. The whole region, or that region, is in disintegration, mm-hmm. to the benefit of the occupier. And they're taking advantage of it. I was at a seminar by a great Arab scholar at SOAS. He talked about the 100 years, of Israel. Well, that explains it too. This Zionist project hasn't come out the blue. Next year is the Balfour Declaration, yeah? Mm-hmm. So, you know, this project, its origins, its rise, and inshallah fall, although it might not happen immediately. It will, you know, there's a beginning and an end to everything. Currently, we're going through trial, or the Palestinians are going through, and Arabs, major trials and tribulations. That is it's okay talking about politics, geopolitics, international relations, the law. The reality is, from a theological perspective, this is what is called mihna. Muslim, you know, otherwise, it's pointless being a Muslim. We have to believe life is a test. This is a test for Islamic civilization, not just Arab, but Islamic civilization, given the role of Jerusalem. This is a great trial and tribulation to see what we are made of. Are we men or mouse? Now, in terms of, so there's impotence there currently. And Muhammad ﷺ said, a time will come during end times when there will be so many Muslims, and that is a fact, 1.6 billion, I take it, of us, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But you will be like the foam of the sea, scum. The fear by the enemy will disappear. That is the reality. Now, coming back to the one nation solution, or otherwise, very simple answer to that. Since not 48, but 67, I would argue, you know, the occupation of Jerusalem, taken from the Hashemites, the Jordanians who had custody up to 67, there has been a one-state solution, which has been imposed. Mm-hmm. So all this Palestinian struggle, you know, so-called struggle, is a farce. We have to relook at history. The reality is the Zionist settler colonial state, it is not democratic. That's a joke. It's a bloody joke. It's beyond a joke. It has been a one-state reality since 67.
Now, of course, we're not currently arguing about whether Israel's a democracy or not. Mm-hmm. What we are asking, however, is whether or not the two-state solution, which everyone clings to, can still physically exist.
No, that's what I've just said to you. I've just said to you, even that great Arab professor at an American university, he basically confirmed what I've said. For us to believe that there is such an option, or was an option, we're fooling ourselves. I've just said to you, since 1967...
So Palestine, in your opinion, is completely gone?
Yes. Just look at the facts on the ground. That's the words they use. The Israeli immigration or emigration, whatever you want to call it, in the West Bank, you cannot have you can have Bantustans, fine, if you want it. But the reality is it is pointless, beyond pointless, talking about a two-nation solution. If there's any solution, it's got to be one nation in which there is equality, or there isn't. But the reality is that is also this land grab. One final point on the land grab. I think it's also given the Mehna, the trials and tribulations. I think it is a rehearsal for a bigger land grab, and that's why our think tank held a private seminar on eschatology. In the 21st century. We believe that the state of Israel has been predicted in end times. We are in a phase of that, and we've seen nothing yet.
Clive, let me bring you back in on this, and then perhaps we'll move to the last topic before we run out of time. The UN, of course, has continuously been trying to deal with the issue of Palestine, Gaza, Israel, and so on, the wars there, the West Bank, and this land grab that we're seeing. And it's pretty much been a failure. Like we've just been discussing, the land grabs continued. The two-state solution seems to be practically impossible at this stage. Do you think that this proves then that the UN is just a big waste of time? It's all talk. It doesn't actually get anything done, and it's just for show. It's just there to make us all feel a bit better.
Well, if one thinks about equivalence, you may recall that the reason we went to Libya was responsibility to protect under a UN resolution. And that was very effective in getting America's will and Britain's will, or more accurately, the structural elite's will, to remove Gaddafi, who threatened banking hegemony. Where is the moral equivalence from the UN in terms of what the Palestinians are being subjected to? Where is the enforcement of the various UN sanctions on nuclear weapons? So any of these hierarchical bodies, and this comes back to earlier, I think, before we started on air, it's about this centralization of power. And the UN is a hierarchical structure which is dominated by the same forces as dominate the EU and dominate everywhere else. So all of these hierarchical structures are captured by the same structural elite. So that's why Israel gets a free pass and Gaddafi gets murdered, basically. So the UN is a tool in the hands of the structural elite. One can argue that it's the American empire driving it through its veto, which it possibly is, but the American empire is another lever of power, as was the British Empire. And it's quite likely that if empire shifts eastward to China, then China will be the chosen vehicle to exercise their will. And until we realise that it's this centralisation of power that is driving problems like what's happening to the Palestinians. There was a man, Abdul Öcalan, PKK, who's locked away by the Turks, who was kidnapped by them and rendered back to Turkey. He has been following the ideas of Murray Bookchin, who wrote a book called The Ecology of Freedom, which is all about non-hierarchical organisation, and the PKK is organised on those sorts of principles. And what he said was, until everyone is free, the Kurds cannot be free. And basically that's it. Until all people on earth are free to manage their own destiny and organise amongst themselves, then nobody is free, because these hegemonic structures will impose wars and deprivation on whoever they choose to, and we're all the victims of that. So we are as much victims of what's going on in Palestine as the Palestinians. We just don't recognise it because we're distracted with X Factor and Premier League football and all the rest of it.
Yes, no, a very good point. Well, I am going to move now to what will probably be our final topic of the night, as we are running out of time, unfortunately. It will take us to Turkey, in fact, well, regarding Turkey, it's actually taking us to the refugee crisis, and in particular, the refugees which are stuck in Greece at the moment. It seems as if reports have come through that a lot of refugees who are likely to be shipped back to Turkey by force, it seems, in the new deal that has been struck between Europe and Turkey, have threatened that they would rather kill themselves than be forced to return to the Middle East, to Turkey, or wherever they're going to be dumped off. We actually have a video, I believe, which we should be able to show to bring us all up to speed on what's going on.
The first deportations under the European Union and Turkey deal took place at 7:30 local time this morning. Right behind these fences, 2 ferries left the Porto Lesbos to go to the town of Dikili in Turkey. Now, one of the ferries had 63 people, while the other one had 68, a total of 131. Although the authorities here, there were more migrants on these boats. Now, we're hearing from Frontex there was mainly Bangladeshis and Pakistanis, but the Greek authorities confirmed that 2 Syrians were also on board who wanted to be reunited with their families in Turkey. Now, this entire process has been met with a lot of anger, as you can see behind me. Activists here shouting, no border, no nations, stop deportations. There are a lot of fears that this entire procedure lacked due process, due and fair process, and the asylum seekers are deprived of basic human rights. Now, this entire process was also there to remove any incentives for migrants seeking irregular routes, as the European Union says. But this hasn't really happened, because yesterday on the shores of Lesbos alone, we saw the arrival of 700 people, and on a daily basis, hundreds and hundreds of refugees and migrants have been coming to Greece seeking to make it to Europe. So there's a big question about how effective this entire procedure is, and of course many question marks about all the refugees and migrants who arrived in Greece before the 20th of March. Greece at now the moment accommodating over 50,000 of them. The EU meant to relocate up to 20,000 by mid-May. Big question marks about that, because the numbers, of course, are nowhere close to that.
And there you have it. That's what's going on regarding the situation in Greece at the moment. Perhaps I'll jump straight to you, Moim, if you don't mind. This particular situation has been going on for a while now. The refugee crisis is an issue which we don't seem to be resolving. This new deal that we've struck with Turkey, many have labelled it as a blackmailing attempt by Turkey on Europe in order to strike a deal which it knows that Europe is desperate to solve, and it seems as if the refugees themselves are, as usual, the ones who are suffering as a result. What do you make of the actual deal itself? I mean, the refugee crisis has to be dealt with somehow, and it seems we are struggling to deal with it. I mean, what do you make of it? Perhaps the refugees are being unfair, labelling, making statements like they're going to commit suicide. I mean, you know, something's got to be done, and at the end of the day, they have to be moved. They can't stay where they are, and originally they were in Turkey. Shouldn't they stay in Turkey?
Okay, it's a very complex issue. I'll be to the point. They are pawns, no doubt, the refugees. Turkey is playing a very, well, the whole situation is very messy, murky. And this is an outcome of the global war on terror. And I don't think Europe expected Afghans, it's not just Syrians, you know, Afghans, Iraqis, Eritreans, Libyans, and other West Africans and so on to, you know, have biblical, almost biblical images, yeah, of an exodus crashing the waters and doors of Europe. So, as I said, I'll repeat that. This is the unintended consequences of this global war, not on terror, I would argue of terror, because of the media control we have been cocooned, or we haven't been fully aware of the impact of all these bombs falling, for years. And now drones is becoming very, sophisticated. And this is the impact, So anyway, the bottom line is these refugees are pawns. They're in a very difficult situation. It's leading to destabilization of Europe. Now this again comes to a bigger issue. At one stage, they were being held in the Turkish borders, yeah? How come they were allowed to, leave Turkey? Now, somebody made a decision. Who? Why? Bottom line is, a lot of things are happening in Europe right now, which is leading to a unforeseen scenario in which community, race relations are being, let's say, mildly upset, leading to, friction between the locals and this flood of, whatever you want to call them. I don't mind what you call them, whether economic refugees or asylum seekers or whatever, basically desperate humanity. And it's quite clear, we could be here all night. The bottom line is a type of destabilization has been kicked off in Europe. And we've got to ask ourselves, whose interest? I mean, in terms of these poor people or, desperate people, of course they need a solution. And whatever the powers that be can do should be done to ease their suffering. That's all I can say.
Yes, Clive, let me bring you in on this now. A very interesting twist in this whole crisis is it seems as if Turkey has politically jumped on the opportunity to seize its moment in trying to push the EU to not only about this deal and to try and warm relations with Turkey and the EU, putting them in a position of higher leverage over the European Union, but also in a position where they're now pushing for their own membership of the European Union at a time where other countries, like we just discussed, are looking to leave. Do you see a scenario where Turkey will actually join the EU?
I think it's unlikely, but I think the more interesting question is why is this going on? What is actually happening here? And as Moeen has said, we've spent 14 years destabilizing the Middle East. And for a long time, in Europe, we were relatively unconcerned at people drowning in the Mediterranean. Mm-hmm. It was only when there was that iconic picture plastered all over the media last August of that boy on the beach, mm-hmm. that suddenly governments seemed to switch and start doing something, specifically Merkel in Germany. And clearly, this has been choreographed. And it was flagged up. I mean, back in the 1920s, there was a plan written by a chap called Kudenov Kalergi, who talked about diluting and destroying European culture mm-hmm. by mass immigration. It was also flagged up by Peter Sutherland, another Bilderberger. In 2014, he talked about we need to break down the cultural barriers in Europe and create a homogeneous society, and we needn't worry too much about what the electorate think about it. So this is all part of a deliberate plan, and Turkey is part player in this. Now we talked about. We
just have 1 minute left, Clive. So just to bring you aware.
Okay, I'll try and round it. I mean, it is very complicated.
It is very big, and it's such a shame we don't have more time in the show.
But Turkey is clearly milking this for all it can. Because it feels it has a strong hand. But I think the game of geopolitics will go on. But the victims, the only way we're going to stop this is to stop causing chaos across the Middle East. Mm-hmm. Then everybody can go home. But we are arming Daesh and we are promoting this fight. Mm. It is us.
Yes.
And we have the power to stop it.
Mm. Well, thank you
Simple
very
as
much.
that.
Yeah, no, well, thank you very much, gentlemen. It was a pleasure to have you both on the show. It's very enlightening, and I certainly learned a lot, and I'm sure my guests, my audience did at home as well. Big thank you to both Clive and Moeem. And yes, we'll be back next Friday, as always, discussing all of the week's biggest news stories and analysing it in a safe environment, unbiased, of course. And yes, we'd love to see you again. I hope you have a lovely weekend. I've been your host for this evening, Mohammed Ali Carter, and make sure you join us next Friday.